afternoon, good day, everyone. We are really excited to have Kevin here today with us, speaking about his journey and also Enara's expedition. Kevin, thank you for being here with us and sharing your story, your experience, and this whole exciting journey. I'm Anse from Life Sciences. I'm very honored to co-facilitate this session for you and really looking forward to hearing the sharing, and also to all our participants here online, as well as the colleagues from Enara. I know that you are also watching and joining in the background. Very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us. Just a short note before we start, this session will be recorded and can be published. So if anyone don't want to be recorded, please feel free to turn off your camera. And into this session, Kevin is going to be talking for around 20-25 minutes, and then we will have time to move into questions that you have building on the story you have heard. So if you have got questions on the way, just drop them in Mentimeter. I will share the link with you just in a second in the chat. So feel free to drop your questions during the session in the Menti, and we will come back to these questions after Kevin's sharing. So Kevin, I think some of us may know you, some not. Maybe we can start with, could you tell us a bit about yourself, about the company, and then of course, about the whole journey that you are on. Over to you.
That's great. All right, fantastic. Thanks, Ansa, for chairing the session, and thanks to Rhea and the whole life sciences team for this invitation. I mean, it really is an honor to participate in this event along so many esteemed Teal colleagues. So my name is Kevin Pojasek. I'm the CEO of Enara Bio. The focus of my storyteller session today is how we've incorporated Teal inspiration into our company in the form of what we call the Enara expedition, which is essentially the metaphor for our cultural journey, the ethos, and how we work at Enara. And so what I'll try to do through the talk is walk through a few specific examples of what we've done and the impact it's had. And I'll try to wrap up with a few kind of lessons learned and maybe some advice, inspiration for others. And we can certainly talk about that as we go. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Great. Can everybody see that? Is that up? Okay, great. Perfect. So I thought I'd just start with maybe the personal component of the journey. I think that's always sort of a helpful place to start. So I'm originally from the Boston area in the US. I'm trained as a PhD scientist and basically spent the last 20 years building and leading biotech companies on both sides of the Atlantic. We loved living in Boston. We'd been there for almost 18 years. I was running a company called Quartet Medicine at the time. I thought this would be fun to share it. Well, a biotech company, none of us were musicians, but we thought it'd be fun to take a photo to memorialize the company. And everything was going great. We loved our life there. And then we decided to move to Oxford. And so this was obviously a big transition for us, the whole family with me at the time and still do, thankfully. And there are many wonderful aspects of this move. We went from living in the city to living in a 17th century converted barn surrounded by fields. It was really fantastic. And it's really kicked off the 7 years that we've spent in the UK since then. I think more importantly, and perhaps relevant for today, is this move really, for me, kicked off a fairly intense period of personal introspection. And a journey that I've been on for the last 7 or so years, trying to get to know myself better, and then how that through that knowledge, I can sort of enhance how I turn up as a leader and the environments that I work in. And I'm sure, like many at this conference, I'd worked in a variety of companies, that were either overtly toxic or subtly toxic, top-down decision making, sort of passive aggressive behavior, and sort of through the reflection around the move, sort of came to a realization, there's got to be a better way. And so I was fortunate. I joined a company called Immunocore in Oxford, where with a dear friend of mine, Namir Hassan, we were able to set up and run a small division within a larger company. So it's really about 50, 60 people within a 400 plus person organization. And we were able to experiment with a lot of the Teal principles. That was sort of the first place we looked to try to take some inspiration to, address the question, there's got to be a better way. And so that was a great learning experience. We had an incredible impact. We had 2 medicines go into the clinic there 6 to 9 months quicker than anything else prior in the company. We had a very engaged, energized workforce. And I think probably for me, the biggest impact I saw was actually how this way of working helped the people in our group, both in the moment and through the work we did together, but subsequently as they've gone on to other roles in the same company or in other companies. I think it really was a foundational event for many of us that helped kind of change our views and our trajectories. And so that really left its mark on me. And as I've gone on this personal journey, the thing I've realized is my purpose, but what sort of gets me out of bed every day is really working to create and foster environments where people can thrive. And so I just feel incredibly fortunate that I can bring this to life every day through the work we do together at Enara. And now I'm increasingly excited about sharing this our story. I've learned so much from so many of you that it's great to actually now start to share our story and give back. Okay, so that's just a bit about me and sort of my motivations. So let's talk about the company for a few minutes. So Enara, first of all, the name itself has sort of an interesting metaphor that sort of runs through a lot of the stuff that we do. So it's an Arabic female name meaning illumination, enlightenment, or to bring lightness into darkness. And so we just felt like this is a really empowering and exciting name aligned with a lot of the work we do. Just in terms of the company, we're roughly 50 people. Really nice, people from over 30 countries, majority female, based in Oxford. We're backed by venture capital investors, so private early stage biotech company. And we've been around for 5 years or so. And that's sort of a high level of the organization. Maybe just quickly on what do we do, recognizing this isn't a scientific talk, but I just thought it might be fun to share. So continuing with sort of the Enara metaphor of shining light where there is darkness, our company is focused on trying to identify a new set of cancer targets derived from the dark genome. And this is basically the more than half of our genetic DNA, genomic DNA, that was written off as junk DNA when the genome sequence was published in early 2000s. Now, as we all know and see time and time again in science, is that once was thought to be junk is actually not the case. And the dark genome is now really turning out to be an incredibly rich source of biology. And the dark antigens that we pursue are one subset of that. And so what we're trying to do is take some of these new fundamental insights in science, discover these targets, and then create medicines that basically can hit those targets and hopefully help a much broader range of patients than are addressed today. And all of this is aligned with our company purpose, which I'll share in a minute. Okay, so with that as a backdrop of the organization, let's talk about the Enara expedition. So this is a metaphor for the culture work that we do together at the company. Obviously, we're on a journey together as a team. There's no preset path. There may or may not be a destination. It's always a work in progress, and we're in this together. And so to build on this metaphor, what we talk about is basically 3 main signposts of the Enara expedition. So the first is the purpose and values of the organization, which is really the beating heart, our connection, what brings us together and holds us together and helps us make decisions. The second is our autonomy signpost, which we'll spend some time on today, but it's really how do we enable interdependent role-based project team work and disseminated decision-making and get outside of hierarchy as much as we can. And then the last piece is authenticity, which is basically just how we turn up and interact with each other. And so I can spend a few more minutes on each of these as we go through the presentation today. Now, not surprisingly to this audience, this will all look somewhat familiar, right? So Frederick Laloux's work and reinventing organization really is a primary source of inspiration for us. And when you think about the three pillars of our organization, it very much comes from and is inspired by Frederick's work. We, in fact, actually, as employees join the company, before they start, we actually send each employee a copy of the illustrated guide to reinventing organizations, really as an opportunity for them to just reflect and think about the organization they're joining, and think about the fact that we do think about culture differently than most conventional organizations, and then think about the impact that they could have, or think about their questions or their skepticisms. But regardless, come and be ready to engage and discuss. And I think the other thing, we use the word inspiration here. I'm very much of the belief that each organization that adopts these kinds of principles really has to make it their own. And there are compromises and adaptations we've made as we've gone that we felt were really best for our company, for the people joining our company, for the broader biotech ecosystem and people coming and going. And so I can share a few examples as we walk through the work that we've done around how we've sort of adapted this and tried to make it our own. Okay, so just coming back to then the signposts of the Enara expedition. So our first is the purpose of the company, which in essence is really to try to take scientific insight and the in-depth expertise and knowledge that we have, and then turn that into medicines that can really have a profound impact on society, really, and through treating more patients with cancer. And having them live longer and more fulfilled lives. And, I think this is very much really at the beating heart of what we do at Enara, and it's something that means a lot to us. I think what we've also come to recognize is that we do have a dual purpose, and this is more on how we do the work, and it's very aligned with my personal purpose. And we want to try to create an ecosystem at the company where everybody can be the best versions of themselves. And I think, part of the motivation for there's several motivations, but part is what we do as scientists trying to, take new insights, turn them into medicines is incredibly challenging, right? And we're actually going to fail a lot more than we succeed. And so, and that failure could be just by the folly of science, that our insights that we thought we had weren't what they were, and there's many reasons. But I guess if we each if each member of the company could say, at the end of the month or year or time here, you know what, I'm better off for having known and worked together with the other members of our team. I think that's a really big impact we can have. And that's completely in our control over the course of the life of the company. And I think if you reflect on that and say, well, if work still, unfortunately, is a negative connotation for many people, or maybe even neutral, if you could remove some of that negativity and replace it even with a modicum of positive thoughts, I think the force multiplier of that, if we can all do that, would be just massive in society. And so I do really think this dual purpose is something that is important to lean on as we go on our journey. We also have a set of values that really arose out of a set of kind of shared beliefs and behaviors. And this is sort of a key part of how we try to turn up and interact with each other on a daily basis. And as you'll see, kind of forms a part of our how we assess performance as well. And we can come on to that in a few slides. I should also say, and this is just kind of I think the nature of a lot of this culture work is my natural tendency is I get very enthusiastic about what's coming next, and where are we going to go and what are we going to do. But equally, part of what I've learned on this journey is obviously, we have people joining and leaving, and you need to consolidate. You need to go back and reflect on some of the work you've already done to make sure it's still fit for purpose or needs to be evolved. So we have a workshop coming up next month where in part we want to reflect on our values and say, does this still represent who we are? Is this the right language around this? And so that'll be a good revisiting of these, having sort of set these out 3.5, 4 years ago. Okay, Great. So another component we did sort of aligned with the purpose was to actually work on trying to capture the Enara ethos. So this is kind of a synthesis of a set of positive beliefs and behaviors aligned with the values, aligned with the purpose that we could unite around. This was also just a great coming together for us. This was, as you can see from some of the masks in the left picture, this was sort of as we were coming out of lockdowns, and many new faces joined over COVID, and this was the first time that we were all together. And if you can look very carefully in the back left-hand corner, you can see a guy, a graphic artist, at a large piece of paper back there to capture the work that we did that day, which is represented here, and this is on the wall at the company. And so this is like a really interesting workshop. We spent a few minutes up front doing some consolidation work, talking about our expedition, the components, and what we were trying to do. And then kind of as a group went on a journey, starting with a sort of personal reflection on our own personal limiting beliefs. And then we moved into a session around company limiting beliefs. So what are the things that we may collectively either say to each other, believe, but not say, that might hold us back. And we shared and discussed those. And then we moved those to a sort of positive assumptions. What are things that we know about ourselves, that we can really be forthright about, that will help us overcome some of these limiting beliefs and then ultimately excel. And then that emerged into components of our Enara ethos, which is very much in line with our values and purpose. And so it was a really nice exercise. I think it brought us all closer together, and the output was really kind of tangible and something that we continue to work on and refine after the fact. So that's an example of some of the work that we did going back a couple of years. So I'll switch gears now and spend a couple of minutes on, or a couple examples of what we've done on the autonomy signpost for the Enara expedition. So this signpost, really is all about enabling everyone in the organization to feel completely empowered to choose, the work that they do, who they do it with, when they do it, how they do it. We really are believers that autonomy is a primary driver of human motivation, and that if we can create an environment where people can embrace that, that's going to be great for everybody and for the business. And so what we tried to do then is create utilize some tools to help enable that, and then to create an ecosystem that reflects that. And so one of the first things that we did, and this will be familiar to many of you, I'm sure, was implement the advice process. And so this is a simple framework that basically allows anyone in the company who senses attention or sees something that needs improving to act on that. And the decider in this case is all they need to do is basically seek advice, from people of expertise, perspective, who'll be impacted by the decision, and then they're fully empowered and accountable to make and implement the decisions. And obviously, the larger the decision, maybe the more advice you need to seek, and all of that. But this has been great, and is a really simple yet powerful tool to help everybody in the company to really have a bigger impact and feel that feel fulfilled through that impact. And then the other thing we've done to sort of capture the ecosystem component of the work that we do together is a sort of exhaustive role-based map of the organization. And so this is the idea to kind of move beyond static conventional job description-led work and job titles to a role-based working, where it is much more about the work that needs to get done. People can energize multiple roles. There's flexibility to move across the organization. If there's interest in something, you don't have to leave and get a new role somewhere else. These are all the benefits that we're trying to do here. And I should say, and I think the idea is also it removes some of the constraints around, or the goal is to try to remove some of the constraints and almost unlearn certain behaviors around, defining yourself as your job title, or thinking about where am I in the hierarchy and all of that. It's trying to really kind of get people to unlearn some of those behaviors and move beyond them. I should also say this is a place where we have compromised a bit. So we haven't thrown away job descriptions. We haven't thrown away career progression and sort of job ladders. And we actually still use job descriptions, just in a slightly different way. And the reason we've done that is we think it's actually important to, as people come into the organization and ultimately leave the organization, they are still operating in what is a fairly conventional world of companies. And so they want to be able to come in and have a certain title and leave with a certain title. And that's important for their career progression. And I think it's also important for a measure of just, personal satisfaction. I think that's inherent. And so we've kept job titles. We just use them slightly differently, and we measure performance slightly differently. But there's still that standard measure progression. And then on job descriptions, we use them primarily to identify what roles do we need to fill within the company. So where are there gaps? And then obviously the job descriptions are helpful for candidates who look at the role, and quite frankly, probably for employees for their first few weeks, just to help orient them. And then the view is very much that's out the window, because the nature of, our company, like most companies, just change is constant and things will evolve and you'll be getting engaged in all sorts of things. And so once you've used that job description as sort of an entree in, then you're here, and there's other guideposts you can use as we go. Okay, so the role mapping, this was a fun exercise that we did last year. And so the idea was basically some prep work, a all-day company meeting, and then a lot of follow-up work to try to move from a conceptual role-based work to a practical, fully enabled role-based work. And so to do this, we basically asked every employee to sort of document the tasks that they do over a few week time. We got together as a company, and through a variety of exercises, I think one of the most memorable was this mute mapping, where you have all these Post-it notes of the different activities up, and then you group them together without speaking. And the idea was to boil this down. So we ended up with about 200 discrete tasks coming out of that day that we narrowed down to about 70 roles. And then we went on to define the roles, define the accountabilities, match the people that are energizing those roles with the roles. And then we've created this great organizational map in collaboration with the Pearden team, who are just fabulous to collaborate with, that helps us, sort of visualize the ecosystem and the work that we do and the different teams and how those teams work together and who sits on what teams. And so this is an incredibly interactive and fun tool, and dynamic, and not hierarchical. So this has been just a great project, and I still feel like we're, in the foothills here. I mean, we're working on governance now. How do we, what are the processes for dropping roles, adding new roles, things like that. So this will continue to take life. And we're also thinking about our external ecosystem, our board of directors, other people that we interact with. How can we have that as part of this? But I mean, this has been an incredibly fun, incredibly rewarding, and I think hopefully very enabling for the autonomous working that we want to be able to do here at Enara. I think the other thing that sort of emerged from this, or maybe emerged in parallel to this, is what we call Compass, which is basically our take on performance management, if you will. And I think one of the cool things about this, for me at least, was that this came up. It was completely emergent from the company. There was a few people who said, "Wait a second, we're getting incrementally better, but we need to reconceive all of this. Let's really put a group together, come up with something, propose it, and then enact it." And so, like most of the really good things we do at the company, I had very little to do with it, which is great. And I think is a good sign of, the culture's working and people do feel like they can make an impact on the business. And so I'll explain sort of what this is in a second, but we basically use this to look at the impact that people have in their roles. So the goals, so for each of the roles, the goals that they set and the impact that they have there, and then basically how one lives the company values. So those are the two things that we'll look at and measure over the course of the year, which is sort of set out on the left-hand side of the screen here. We have feedback conversations happening routinely, but more formally each quarter. And then we sort of have the year-end roll-up of all of that that we look at. I guess another thing that was really fun about this was launched. Our head of corporate development actually put together a company-wide feedback day where we launched Compass, and he shared this template where we kind of just practiced giving and receiving feedback, had a lot of interaction with different team members, and we're able to share that. It was a really good sort of catalyst for launching the Compass system, and then being able to give and offer more consistent feedback. We also do a lot of personal development, but we kind of do see this as very different than performance, right? This is for the individual. This is for how can we all help each other be better versions of ourselves, whether in our role or more broadly in our lives. And so there's a lot of work that goes on there, and runs in parallel to this, but it is kind of slightly set aside from Compass and the performance management system. And then what we've done for each of the roles, so this kind of then integrates roles in Compass, is we've sort of set out different levels for each of the roles, right? And the idea here is that, you may come in with a set of expertise in a certain area, and that's going to be your primary role, and you're going to be a master at it. And that's why, in first instance, you got attracted to the company, and we got attracted to you coming in. But equally, there's going to be other things that you're interested in and other things that you can explore. And so it gives people the opportunity to say, hey, I'm going to try, a role in finance, or I'm going to try a role in corporate development. And, I'm going to be a novice, and I'm going to be learning in the role. And that's great. That's okay. That's, we should embrace that, and support people in that. So we're able to look at different levels within roles, and then use that to see how you're maturing in the roles that you're taking on over time, and use that as an additional way to think about how, in addition to the impact that you're having in the roles, how you're progressing through those roles. And then all of this is meant to be done in line with the values that we have as a company. Good. So those are a few quick examples. I'll just wrap up with a few reflections, and then maybe we can go into the conversation. So I think a few things for me. I think my view has always been that when we started this, there was no turning back. And so where we were going to go, what it was going to shape it was going to take, who knows? But I think once you sort of see the benefits of operating in a slightly unconventional way, there really is no going back. And we've made the journey our own. I think another thing I've come to realize is that, sometimes it's just best to let it happen. And the Compass project, for example, was entirely emergent from the company, and I think when you really start to hit your stride, you start to see things like that happening everywhere, and that's really part of the whole purpose of this, is to enable that and to get everybody engaged and have a big impact. And then pace, I touched on this earlier. I think this is a big one. I always tend to be trying to push ahead, and I've learned to be more patient and also sense and respond. There may be things that a subset of us think are great, but others don't, or need to be adapted for in the broader group. And so we just need to recognize everybody's in a different place and coming with a different perspective. And it's just important to be alive to that. Patience, as I said, I think going back and consolidating, visiting messages to ensure they're still the right ones, and that everybody understands them. And I think another piece here that's really important is that a lot of this, and some critiques, I would say, of some of the companies operating on these principles it can be all altruistic, and I think that's definitely not the case. We really do promote courageous conversations. If somebody's unhappy at the company, they're unhappy, we're unhappy. The worst thing you can do is not hit it head on and try to help them. And what we always say, especially with people leaving the organization, is we're going to support you. We supported you on the way in, we're going to support you on the way out. So, we can be aligned with the purpose and the values of the company, but still have those important, courageous conversations and the ability to make sharp decisions. And then finally, I guess I'll just end with a personal reflection. As I mentioned at the outset, I think my own personal sort of inward journey to get to know myself better, and how I turn up has had a big impact on me. And we're trying to, offer those types of conversations to everybody in the company, And I guess one of the things I've realized is that, the inward journey is great and probably necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I think being able to create even a small community of people who can interact with each other and share their own insights and their own personal journeys, I think it's through those connections and the fostering of those connections that I think the real magic starts to happen and people can feed off of each other. And we're creating almost a civic connection within the company, at a time, quite frankly, where a lot of the civic connections more broadly in the world are being eroded. And so I think I've been really focused on the inner journey. I've now sort of come back out and seen the value in sharing and fostering those types of conversations amongst our group. Okay, so that's it. I did just want to quickly thank a few of our partners in this because we don't travel alone. So the team at Parallax, Sarah and Chris, have been instrumental in both personal coaching as well as some of the workshops I mentioned. Nathan and Peerdham, if you don't know these guys, they're fantastic and do great work in the visualization of role-based work. We work with a guy named Giles Hutchins, who's this book Leading by Nature. I highly recommend, and is very much in the spirit of Teal. And then Jackie and Sam at the bottom from Change Pace and Vital Thrive are also groups that we've worked with to do workshops and personal coaching. So thank you all very much. I'll stop sharing at this point. Thank you for listening, and I would love to hear your questions and have a conversation.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for walking us through this journey and also share some really tangible practices that you are doing with the team. I was watching the Menti. I think I really sense a very high energy in the room. There are a lot of questions there. And I think before going in there was also a question from the chat from Nora about, I'll just read it out. So love that you started with personal limiting beliefs. How did you facilitate that reflection?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a timely question. I think the Enara team may be smiling. So for this first exercise was actually just very simple. All we asked people to do, we were sitting at sort of, large circular tables. So it's maybe 6 or 7 or 8 of us at a table. And what we asked people to do, we had just a note card with a piece of string and then like a metal tree in the corner. And what we asked people to do was just spend a few minutes in silence thinking about what is their primary limiting belief that they feel like holds them back, and to just write it down on the card and to go hang it up on the tree. And so it was a very simple, very personal, not meant to be discussion. I'd say one of the interesting things that happened was the people I was sitting with on the table, we just started talking about it. So it was very interesting. And I think then what naturally emerged, which is often what does emerge when you have these conversations, is, oh my goodness, we all have very similar limiting beliefs, right? It's imposter syndrome, or I'm not good enough, or, and it's these voices in your head telling you these things. And I think that the art then becomes, how do you move beyond those voices and know that that's not you, that's just a lot of noise, and then come to understand yourself better. So that was basically how we did it in the moment. We are giving thought to revisiting this as a company, of the belief that we can create this perfect ecosystem and do all of these wonderful things, but if people don't unlock their limiting beliefs, we're always going to be held back from sort of peak engagement in it. And so I do think there's a lot of fundamental insight that we can do there to unlock that. We've also done personal values workshops that have been really helpful for people and had nothing to do with the company, just conversations with peers over a couple of hours on their personal values. And so I think the more we can open these doors to this inward journey and then bring that back out for conversation, I think the better off we're going to be.
Thank you, Kevin. I really love the way how you describe. I feel like I can see this workshop you have in the circle with the tray. And I resonate a lot with you that I think this kind of conversations, it really triggers a lot of reflections. Like in our company, we also do every year like a purpose session. And every time I'm surprised to hear, how much we have in common. At the same time, how different we are from each other. So now let me have a look of the questions from Menti. I think we have a long list here, and feel free to add your questions. So the first one we have here is, how do you actually encourage self-leadership and self-accountability?
Yeah, I think, I think the first thing to recognize is that everybody's going to come to us with it on a different place in their journey in every dimension, right? So we'll have some sort of Poisson distribution of people who are, sort of coming to us for, self-actualization, and others who, are just happy to come in and get their work done and head home. And so I think that's important to recognize. And then I think what we just try to do is create, roles in the company that gives everybody a chance to lead, right? I think if you view leadership as really, how can I help you? How can I serve you to do what you need to do better? We can all do that. And we could all do that in everything that we do. So I think there's a philosophy and a ethos there that we try to bring to play. And then more practically, what we try to do is create roles within our project teams and within the work that we do to give people more sort of conventional leadership roles, right? So being program leads and taking on that responsibility of communication and helping drive the project forward, but also maturing their teams. And I think, it's a careful process of we want to support people in this, but not put people in the deep end of the pool where they're really uncomfortable. So you need to be in your courage zone, but not way out there. And so we just try to stay live to it and help people do that. And equally, I think it needs to be a give and take, right? So that people need to come to us and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. I really want to step up and try this. Is there an opportunity? And so we look for that as well, because I think there has to be we're all in this together. And so the more that any of us put in, the better off we're going to be at the end of the day. So those are some of the things that we try to do and think about. And I think, putting the advice process into work and, and not coming in and second guessing decisions and, overruling and, just sort of generally behaving yourself, I think goes a long way as well. Which is, consistent with our values and how people expect us to behave. So I think that helps a bit as well.
Thank you. And I really like the point you mentioned that kind of to consider this is also a process that people may not feel comfortable at the beginning. So how we actually support them, that also give them opportunity to be more proactive and calm and to ask for that accountability. That's really beautiful. And talking about leadership, there is another question around that. So what are the insights you are getting during this journey as a leader yourself, and how do these insights actually impact your own leadership style?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, for me, I think for me, it's just sort of a continuous process, right? There's a lot of personal reflection I like to do. And then there's sort of the, operating in the company and the external world that informs it. So hopefully it's most of the time a virtuous cycle and a positive one. I think, I guess the things that I've learned and maybe another way to think about it, the things that I've been most rewarded by, I think felt a deep sense of satisfaction by, is the fact, as we've grown, when we started out as, you always start out, you're a small company where maybe 10, 15 people, I'm close to or directly involved in every hiring decision that we make. And then COVID happened, and then we, doubled in size and then doubled again, and people come and go, and you're removed from that. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that what I see is that we continually, the people that we hired have gone on to hire great people, and they've gone on to hire great people. And that sort of really, I think, is a reflection of the totality of the culture work that we do, the totality of the leadership environment that we're trying to put in place here. And then I get to, I sit down with every employee when they start and just have a chat. And, those are some of the most rewarding conversations I have, period. And so I don't know, is that leadership? I think I am a big believer of getting out of the way, right? I mean, I think if I'm doing my job perfectly, which will never happen, but let's pretend, I would make no decisions, right? It would be my job to basically just give people what they need, information, resource, time, whatever it is, to do the work that they need to do. And so, I guess I've come to that, right? I think earlier in my career, maybe like others, it's very achiever led. You want to get stuff done. You want to be seen to be getting stuff done. You want to be, and I think I still like doing stuff, but, for me, I'm much more rewarded by seeing others do stuff and succeed. And so that's maybe a component of how this has evolved for me and how I see things differently perhaps than I used to.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing this so openly. And I really love the quote you said, I make no decisions. So really let the others take this and see them actually thriving in this environment. So there's a question about what you have mentioned during your talk about passive aggression. So what are your experience about how to react completely competently when experience passive aggression?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think thankfully, the best way to deal with it is to create an organization that doesn't have it or move to one that doesn't have it, but that's not always practical, is it? I mean, for me, I always like to, and I think I've maybe gotten better at this over the years, is when you see a certain pattern of behavior, try to understand what is that behavior, what's driving it, and maybe what's the unmet need that underlies that behavior. I mean, that may be hard to do in the moment, but I always try to think about why is that person behaving that way, and then I think that can inform how I respond. I think it depends massively on the context. So if it's a peer in a company, it might be more of a, hey, I've noticed this. It's everything. You can try to have a conversation to unpack what's going on and see what's going on there. I mean, with others, we have a lot of complex interactions with board members and investors and things like that. And there, it's probably a little bit more of like, okay, I need to understand this, need to see what's behind it, and maybe there's a little bit more plotting that needs to happen to try to figure out, okay, do I ignore it? Do I do something about it? Is there something else is there a question behind the question or feeling behind the feeling? So I think it's really context dependent, but I think the number one thing is to recognize it, have a degree of empathy towards it, and then depending on the situation, either unpack it or ignore it, I guess, is the two bookends.
Thank you, Kevin. And I think here you mentioned that either address it. So this comes then to also the feedback topic that we have a question in the chat about. Could you tell a bit more about the performance management process? You mentioned that you have this regular performance talk, that you encourage people to give feedback to each other. Is there any model or framework you are using? Just could you tell a bit more about that?
Yeah, we've kept it fairly loose. I think the principles we want are, as we all know, right? The best feedback is given in the moment. It's actionable. It's with genuine intent to improve. And so that runs throughout, and we encourage people to have feedback conversations all the time. What we've done just in terms of structure is we've just set up quarterly discussions with, people that for each individual, the people that they work closest with, to have more, I think intentional feedback discussions that they can integrate and think about how they're doing against their the goals that they've set out and what they're trying to achieve and how they're living our values. And then, I think it just sort of progresses over the course of the year, and we sit down at the end of the year and sort of sum it all up. And I think the key for us when we introduced this was what we're not trying to do is year-end performance management 4 times, right? we want to avoid, I mean, it still has to be done for probably certain reasons, but we want to avoid the typical, you set goals in January, somebody sits down with you in December, there's no feedback along the way. It's a bit arbitrary. It shouldn't be that way, right? It has to be about continuous growth and performance. So, I mean, that's basically it. We have different systems for capturing the information and tracking the information, but we've tried to keep it a bit light such that people can do it in their own way. And then certainly if there are questions and people need support, there are different, either internal or external resources we can bring to bear to help them with that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this perspective. So it's really not about kind of a review, but more about understand where people is, what kind of support they need, so that actually at the end of the year they feel really fulfilled. Really love that. And there's such a long list. So let me see which one is voted. Okay. So when you share the journey, there are 3 elements, and one of them is authenticity. Could you tell us a bit more about this? How do you define authenticity in your company?
Yeah, no, it's great. I didn't talk about this one because it's almost a separate talk unto itself. So I think the idea here is that if we can all, I think we all carry around different masks that we put on to protect ourselves, right? That sort of evolve over time and are there. And the idea is if we can sort of strip away that and be in a place where we can just interact with each other as who we are. I just think that's makes for a much more richer experience, and we can actually have real conversations and really connect. It will enrich the work. It will hopefully also enrich the personal development that we want to achieve. And so I think it's about, part of it is just recognizing the masks and stripping them away. And then a lot of it is creating the environment where people feel comfortable doing that, right? Because a lot of this is about trust and comfort and inclusion, and a sense of belonging and feeling like people are really part of this. So there's a whole set of things that we do organizationally that are constantly changing with different clubs and different sort of events to foster this. But that's at the heart of it, is really about trying to feel like we can all be comfortable just breaking down the barriers that we put up and interacting with each other as our true selves. And I think if we can do that, then I just think that's where the magic happens. And it's hard. And it's probably the most important signpost. It's third, but it is probably the most fundamental important signpost because it sort of underpins everything else.
Yeah, I actually have a follow-up question on this. I think you mentioned at the very beginning you are around 50 plus people, but from more than 30 countries. So culturally, it's really diverse backgrounds. And talking about authenticity, like, are there anything specific that you are doing or practicing in a company to kind of create this safe and open environment?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely no. And I think this is when I spoke earlier about, hiring great people. This is kind of what I meant. Like, I think for us, we want, we don't want people who are just all like us, right? And we want people who are going to challenge us and help us grow and come with different life experiences. And whether that's through where you're from or, socioeconomically or any other dimension, that's something we embrace and welcome. And then, I mean, a lot of the stuff we do on a routine basis is pretty simple. Like we did a big Chinese New Year celebration this year, right? Where everybody gets together. There was a bunch of activities. There's some great food. We have a book club. There was a board games night last night. So it's really, it's meant to be. And I think this is a great area where it could just be emergent. Like, what do people want to do? Let's just go do it, right? Like, there's no barriers there. We should do all of that. So those are just some of the things that we try to do to encourage people to share more about themselves and feel comfortable in the environment that we're in. We also have, I mean, it's funny how the little things turn out to really matter, but we moved into some new space at the end of COVID. And we've got this sort of open area, kitchen area. But one of the things that we did was we ordered a very large oval table with high top stools. And so you go in there every day at lunch and there's 15 people hanging out having lunch, right? And so you could just rock up and sit down and have a conversation, and it's just very accessible and great. And equally, there's places to have quiet lunches as well. So I don't know. I think there's elements of that just even the space design can be really helpful.
Really like these examples. I think really give us some ideas how we could connect with each other with some little activities together. We have actually a question about okay, so there is a question saying, is there any specific reason to not show your Teal DNA on your website? Do you see specific concerns from your stakeholders?
Yeah, it's a great question. And maybe more than that, which I really appreciate. So it's interesting. So I think what we try to represent on the website is who we are without sort of attaching labels to it or branding. So I think it's there. The inspiration is there, but it's just not verbal. Is there intention behind that? Maybe partly. I do think we have a variety of stakeholders who have a variety of views on company culture and things. And quite frankly, a lot of them are outdated, right? There's just a lot of outmoded thinking around human behavior, human motivation. And so I guess the way I've tried to square that is, look, you're going to have your view. I'm going to have my view. We can have a conversation about it, but I think ultimately it's my role to help create this, and you can feed into it. But ultimately, come visit us, right? Spend time with us, talk to everybody, and you tell us if it's working. And if it's working, and we disagree on what it is and how we're doing it, then maybe we should just, you can stay out of it, and we'll carry on. Does that feed through the website? Probably not. But I think there are corners of our ecosystem where, there's just conventional views and what I prefer. Well, I'm happy to evangelize about what we do to anybody. Equally, I really, it's for us, and I want it to be for us, and not have it interfered with. Now, again, does that reflect on the website? I don't know, but that's maybe more some of the philosophy behind why it might not be there. We're definitely not ashamed of it. Obviously, as I'm here speaking. So,
thank you, Kevin. There is another question about actually who is helping your growth. So in the morning session, there was one speaker talking about there are people that he trusts and could really give him very candid feedback. So we are also curious who helps you to grow as a human being and as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a variety of folks in my life who help fill that. So one is my personal coach, Sarah Morris, who I mentioned earlier from Parallax. Is her and I have had a coaching relationship for many years now, and so that is incredibly valuable to me. And I'm a big believer in personal coaching as a tool for sort of inward reflection and growth. I've got a variety of friends and people I work closely with who I sort of count on for advice and conversation throughout my life. The other thing we do as a senior leadership team is we each have identified our learning edge, right? So the thing that we're trying to work on to get better so we can be more effective and better in our roles. And we routinely have conversations with each other in the round and individually about feedback on behaviors or whatever people are working on to try to help foster that. So I think that's really, I find that really beneficial and helpful when I have others who I can engage to help me try to do a better job with the things that I'm working on. And then I do read a lot. I mean, I do take inspiration from different things that I read and different conversations that I have. And I try to meet people who are, outside of the core work that I do to just learn and be inspired. And so I think that's part of the iteration as well. And then this gives you something to talk about and explore. And yeah, so those are some of the people and how I utilize that personally.
That's beautiful. I think we are almost coming to the end. Maybe before we close this session, is there anything you want to share or any words you want to give to the future organizations who are actually starting or also going on this Teal or self-organization journey?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to thank you again, Ansa, and the whole Teal Around the World team for the invitation. This has been great, and I thank everybody who participated and shared questions, and very much would love to follow up and interact. I guess, yeah, I mean, I think that maybe the biggest, especially, so I come from sort of an entrepreneurial startup background, and I think you can always tell yourself that there's something more important. I need to worry about this, that, or the other, especially when you're small and growing. But there really is nothing more important than getting the bedrock culture of the company right and creating an environment where everybody can feel like they can thrive and have that personal benefit and then that benefit together as a team. And so I think the advice is just, don't make excuses, start early. And if you don't know where to start, like, just come talk to some of us or find somebody that you can talk to help figure out how to start the journey and then how to make it true to who you are. I think that's my sort of biggest advice is don't wait, spend time on it. It's really, there's nothing more important.
That's amazing. So on behalf of everyone, thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you for your sharing. It has been really amazing and insightful. So we are coming to the end of our session, but if you would like to continue this conversation and maybe have a bit deeper discussion on this, we will welcome you to actually the spatial chat. I will just copy the link here. So if you would like to deep dive on this conversation, please join us there. And for the others, the other sessions are still ongoing. So I'm also going to paste the following sessions if you would like to go to any of them. And with this, thank you everyone for joining me and Kevin in this session, and see you in the spatial chat.